Fog rolled off the San Francisco Bay like the breath of a dying ghost. It was 1963. The world had changed. Presidents had changed. Music had changed. But the gray walls of Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary had remained the same. Cold, unforgiving, eternal. The steel gates groaned open with a sound that echoed in the marrow of your bones. A single figure stepped out into the mist. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. 10 years, 3,650 days of staring at concrete. They said Alcatraz was designed to break a man. They said it was a machine that ground human souls into dust. But as Bumpy stood on the dock, waiting for the ferry that would take him back to the land of the living, he didn't look broken. He looked sharpened. He was older now. The hair at his temples was dusted with iron gray. The lines around his eyes were deeper, carved by sleepless nights and the constant vigilance required to survive among the worst predators in America. But his back was straight. His shoulders were set like a mountain range. He wore a long charcoal trench coat that swallowed the damp air, and a fedora pulled low over eyes that had seen everything and feared nothing. He didn't look back at the prison. Men who look back are men who have regrets. Bumpy Johnson had no regrets. He only had plans. The train ride across the country was a blur of motion, but Bumpy sat still as a statue. He was saving his energy. He knew that the hardest part wasn't surviving the cage, it was surviving the jungle he was returning to. When the train finally hissed into Grand Central Station, the air smelled different. It smelled of diesel, ozone, and urgency. New York City, the beast that never sleeps. Bumpy walked out of the station, carrying a single leather suitcase. It contained everything he owned in the world. 2 suits, a Bible, a book on chess, and a straight razor wrapped in an oilcloth. He hailed a cab. "Harlem," he said. His voice was gravel, unused to speaking more than a few words at a time. 125th and Lenox. The cab driver, a young kid who chewed gum loudly, looked in the rearview mirror. He didn't recognize the passenger. He didn't know he was driving a legend. He just saw an old man in an out-of-style coat. As the cab moved uptown, crossing the invisible border into Harlem, Bumpy looked out the window. His heart, usually a cold engine of calculation, skipped a beat. This wasn't the Harlem he had left. The streets were dirtier. The people moved faster, their eyes darting around with paranoid energy. In the doorways where old men used to play checkers, young men now stood with hollow eyes, selling poison in small glassine bags. Heroin. It was flooding the veins of his city. Bumpy saw a group of teenagers on a corner, shouting at an elderly woman who was trying to cross the street. They were laughing at her, disrespecting her. Bumpy's hand tightened on the handle of his suitcase until the leather creaked. In his day, there was order. There was a code. You didn't touch civilians. You didn't poison your own well. You respected your elders. But 10 years is a long time. The rats had multiplied while the cat was away. The cab pulled up to the corner of 125th. Bumpy paid the driver and stepped out. The pavement felt hard under his shoes. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of fried chicken, exhaust fumes, and cheap perfume. He was home, but he was a ghost in his own kingdom. He walked past the pool halls and the corner stores. He saw the way people looked at him. Some of the older folks stopped, their eyes widening in disbelief. They whispered to each other, pointing. "Is that? No, it can't be. He's back." But the young ones, the soldiers in flashy suits with loud jewelry, they looked right through him. To them, he was just another relic, an old man who didn't know his time had passed. They were wrong. Time hadn't passed Bumpy Johnson. It had just been waiting for him to catch up. The Lenox Lounge. It had been Bumpy's office, his throne room, the place where he held court, settled disputes, and ordered executions over plates of chicken and waffles. Tonight, the lounge was alive, but it was a different kind of life. It was loud, chaotic, and lacking in class. The jazz band was playing too fast, trying to keep up with the frantic energy of the crowd. And sitting at the best table in the house, table number 1, the circular booth in the back corner that commanded a view of the entire room, was the man responsible for the chaos. They called him Smooth. He was 25 years old, but he acted like he owned the world. He was wearing a suit that was electric blue, a color that screamed for attention. Gold chains hung around his neck, thick enough to anchor a boat. Diamond rings glittered on 4 fingers. He was handsome in a predatory way, with a smile that showed too many teeth and eyes that never stayed still. Smooth was the new face of Harlem. He was the heroin king. He didn't care about community, he cared about volume. He didn't care about respect, he cared about fear. He was sitting with his crew, a dozen sycophants who laughed too hard at his jokes and lit his cigarettes before he could even ask. "So I told the guy," Smooth shouted, his voice cutting through the music, "I told him, you can pay me in cash or you can pay me in teeth. And guess what? The fool started counting his molars." The table erupted in laughter. Smooth leaned back, putting his feet up on the velvet seat opposite him, the seat where Bumpy Johnson used to sit. An old waiter, a man named Jeremiah, who had worked at the lounge for 30 years, approached the table with a tray of drinks. Jeremiah's hands were shaking. He hated Smooth. He remembered the old days. "Watch it, old man," Smooth snapped, as Jeremiah placed a glass down a little too hard. "You spill that on my suit, and I'll buy your life just to fire you." "I'm sorry, Mr. Smooth," Mr. Jeremiah mumbled, keeping his head down. Smooth grabbed Jeremiah's arm. "That's right, you be sorry. You know, you used to serve him, didn't you? The old man, Johnson?" The table went quiet. Mentioning Bumpy was usually taboo, but Smooth was feeling invincible tonight. "Yes, sir," Jeremiah whispered. "Well, he ain't coming back," Smooth announced, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "I heard he's feeding pigeons in a park somewhere. Or maybe he died in that cell and they forgot to bury him. Harlem belongs to the young now. It belongs to the hungry." Smooth took a sip of his drink and spat it back into the glass. "This is warm. Get me another one. And bring a bottle of the good stuff, not the swill you used to serve Bumpy." Jeremiah hurried away, his heart breaking. He looked at the door, wishing, praying for a miracle. But miracles were in short supply in 1963. Smooth laughed again, high and cruel. He didn't know it, but he was a dead man walking. He was a renter sitting in an owner's chair, and the rent was past due. The front door of the Lenox Lounge was heavy oak, solid and imposing. At 9:42 p.m., the handle turned. The door didn't fly open. It didn't slam. It opened slowly, deliberately, pushed by a steady, irresistible force. A gust of cold November wind swept into the club, cutting through the smoke and the perfume. Bumpy Johnson stepped across the threshold. He stopped just inside the door, letting his eyes adjust to the dim red light. He stood there for a moment, a silhouette against the streetlights outside. The trench coat made him look larger than he was, like a monolith carved from shadow. At first, nobody noticed. The band played on. The laughter at Smooth's table continued. But then a ripple effect started. The doorman, a young tough guy hired by Smooth, stepped forward to block the path of this old man. He put a hand on Bumpy's chest. "Cover charge is $5, Pop," the bouncer sneered. "And we have a dress code." Bumpy didn't look at the bouncer. He didn't speak. He simply moved his left hand, grabbing the bouncer's wrist. He squeezed. He didn't twist. He didn't strike. He just applied the pressure of 10 years of breaking rocks. The bouncer's face went white. His knees buckled. He fell to the side, gasping, clutching a wrist that felt like it had been crushed by a hydraulic press. Bumpy released him and kept walking. That was when the room shifted. The people at the bar turned. They saw the bouncer on the floor. They looked up. They saw the face from the newspapers, the face from the legends. The whispers started like a brush fire. "Oh my God, it's him, Bumpy." The piano player looked up. He stopped playing in the middle of a chord. The drummer froze, his sticks hovering in the air. The saxophone sputtered and died. Silence crashed into the room. Absolute, suffocating silence. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator behind the bar and the tap, tap, tap of Bumpy Johnson's leather shoes on the hardwood floor. He walked down the center aisle. He didn't look left, he didn't look right. His eyes were locked on one point in the room. Table number 1. Smooth was mid-laugh when he realized the music had stopped. He frowned, looking around. "Hey, why did the noise stop? I didn't say cut the—" He froze. He saw the figure approaching. He saw the gray fedora. He saw the eyes that burned with a cold, blue flame intensity. Smooth felt a sensation he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Primal, instinctual fear. It started in his stomach and clawed its way up his throat. He tried to swallow, but his mouth was suddenly dry as sand. His bodyguards, the 12 sycophants, shifted in their seats. They were armed. They were young. They outnumbered this old man 12 to 1. But nobody reached for a gun. Nobody stood up. They were paralyzed by the sheer weight of the history walking toward them. Bumpy didn't rush. Kings don't run. He took his time, letting the tension build, letting every step hammer a nail into Smooth's confidence. He reached the table. He stood there, towering over the young usurper. He looked at the flashy suit. He looked at the gold chains. He looked at the drink sitting on the table where his drink used to sit. Bumpy didn't say hello. He didn't announce himself. He simply stood there, waiting. Smooth knew he had to do something. The whole club was watching. His reputation was on the line. If he let this old man intimidate him, he was finished. He forced a smile onto his face. It looked like a grimace. "Well, well," Smooth said, his voice cracking slightly before he found his rhythm. "Look what the cat dragged in, the ghost of Harlem past." Smooth spread his arms wide, trying to take up space. "You lost your way, old man? The nursing home is 3 blocks down." His men chuckled nervously, but the laughter died instantly when Bumpy's gaze shifted to them. Bumpy still hadn't spoken. He slowly unbuttoned his trench coat. The movement was casual, but every muscle in the room tensed. Was he going for a gun? He took off the coat and draped it over an empty chair. He took off his hat and placed it gently on the table, right next to Smooth's drink. Then Bumpy placed his hand, his heavy, calloused, hard rock hand, on Smooth's shoulder. He didn't squeeze. He just let the weight of it rest there. It felt like an anchor. "You're in my seat," Bumpy said. His voice was low, a rumble of thunder from a distant storm. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Smooth bristled. He shoved Bumpy's hand off his shoulder. He stood up, trying to use his height, trying to look menacing. "Your seat?" Smooth laughed, a high-pitched, manic sound. "You senile old fool. Do you know who I am? I own this street. I own this club. I own the air you're breathing right now. Your time is done, Johnson. You're yesterday's news. Go feed your pigeons before I have my boys throw you out in the trash." Smooth reached for the bottle of whiskey on the table, intending to pour himself a drink to show how unbothered he was. Bumpy moved. It wasn't a fast movement, like a boxer. It was a fluid, inevitable movement, like a cobra striking. His right hand dipped into his suit pocket. Schlink! The sound was sharp, metallic, and terrifyingly clear in the silent room. Before Smooth could blink, before his bodyguards could even twitch, Bumpy Johnson was inside his guard. Bumpy's left hand gripped the back of Smooth's neck, pulling him forward. His right hand brought the object up. A straight razor. The blade was polished silver, gleaming under the club lights. It was incredibly sharp, honed to a molecular edge on the leather strops of Alcatraz. Bumpy pressed the cold steel against Smooth's cheek, right below the eye. Smooth froze. He stopped breathing. He could feel the razor's edge biting into the peach fuzz on his skin. 1 millimeter of pressure, and his face would open up. 1 inch, and his jugular would be severed. The bodyguards jumped up, hands going to their jackets. Whispered. "Sit down," Bumpy whispered. He didn't look at them. He kept his eyes locked on Smooth. "If anyone moves," Bumpy said to the room, "the boy loses an eye, maybe 2. The bodyguards froze. They looked at Smooth for orders, but Smooth couldn't speak. He was staring cross-eyed at the blade that was kissing his skin. He could smell Bumpy now. Old spice, starch, and the metallic scent of violence. "You talk too much," Bumpy said to Smooth. "You talk about owning things, but you don't own anything, son. You're just renting." Bumpy leaned in closer, his lips brushing Smooth's ear. "And the landlord is back." The tension in the room was physically painful. A waitress dropped a glass in the back, but nobody turned to look. Smooth was trembling. A bead of sweat rolled down his forehead, navigated the bridge of his nose, and dripped onto the razor blade. "Please," Smooth whispered. The arrogance was gone. The flashy gangster had evaporated, leaving behind a terrified boy in a costume. "Bumpy, Mr. Johnson, I didn't know." Ignorance is not an excuse. Disrespect is a choice. Bumpy adjusted his grip on the razor. "I could kill you right now," Bumpy said, his voice a calm monotone. "I could open your throat and let you bleed out on this floor. It would be easy. The world would be a cleaner place." He paused. "But a dead man can't learn, and a dead man can't tell the others." Bumpy pressed the blade. Smooth whimpered. "This is a gift. Every time you look in the mirror, every time you shave, every time you smile, you will remember this moment. You will remember who gave you your life back." With a flick of his wrist, a movement so fast it was almost invisible, Bumpy moved the razor. Zip! Smooth gasped. He didn't scream. He was too shocked. A thin, precise red line appeared on his right cheek. It ran from his cheekbone down to his jaw. It wasn't deep enough to kill, but it was deep enough to scar forever. It was a branding, a signature. Blood began to bead up along the cut, a crimson tear rolling down his face. Bumpy pulled the razor back. He looked at the blood on the blade. Smooth reached up, touching his face with trembling fingers. He looked at his blood-stained hand in horror. Bumpy reached into Smooth's breast pocket and pulled out the young man's expensive silk handkerchief. He calmly wiped the blood off his razor. He cleaned the blade slowly, methodically, showing total disregard for the man he had just cut. He folded the razor. Click. He put it back in his pocket. Then he tossed the bloody handkerchief on the table. "Get out," Bumpy said. Smooth stared at him. "I said, get out," Bumpy repeated, slightly louder, "and take your trash with you." Smooth stumbled back. He looked at his bodyguards, but they were already backing away, distancing themselves from the loser. In the jungle, when the alpha lion returns, the jackals scatter. Smooth grabbed his cheek, turned, and ran. He ran out of the club, his gold chains jingling, his dignity left in a puddle on the floor. His men followed him, heads down, ashamed. Table number 1 was empty. Bumpy stood alone at the table. He looked at the empty glass Smooth had left behind. He picked it up with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated and dropped it into the ice bucket. He sat down. He sat in the center of the circular booth. He spread his arms along the back of the velvet seat. He took a deep breath. It felt right. It felt like the world had clicked back into its proper axis. The silence in the club was still absolute. Everyone was waiting. Bumpy looked up at the bartender. "Jeremiah?" Bumpy called out. The old waiter rushed forward, tears in his eyes. "Yes, Mr. Johnson. Welcome home, sir." "Bring me a cognac," Bumpy said. "Clean glass." "Right away, sir." Bumpy looked at the band. The musicians were staring at him. "Well," Bumpy said, gesturing with his hand, "I didn't tell you to stop playing. Play something with soul. None of that noise." The piano player nodded frantically. He hit the keys. A slow, smooth, soulful blues rhythm filled the air. The drums kicked in. The saxophone wailed, low and mournful, but beautiful. The room exhaled. The conversation started again, but it was respectful now. The volume was lower. The chaos was gone. Order had been restored. People began to approach the table, not to laugh, not to joke, but to pay homage. "Good to see you, Bumpy. Welcome back, King." Bumpy nodded to them, one by one. He didn't smile. He didn't need to smile. He was the Godfather. Jeremiah placed the cognac on the table. Bumpy lifted the glass. He swirled the amber liquid, watching the light catch it. He took a sip. It burned, warm and familiar. He had returned from the dead. He had walked into the lion's den armed only with a piece of steel and his reputation, and he had taken it all back without firing a single bullet. Because Bumpy Johnson knew a secret that Smooth never learned. Power isn't about the loudest suit. It isn't about the biggest gun. Power is when you walk into a room and the room changes to fit you. Bumpy lit a cigar, the smoke curling up around his face like a crown. He looked at his reflection in the mirror across the room. He saw the gray hair. He saw the lines. But he also saw the eyes of a king. He was back, and Harlem would never forget again. The story of the razor at the table spread through New York overnight. By morning, every hustler, dealer, and thief knew that Bumpy Johnson wasn't an old man feeding pigeons. He was the shark in the water. Smooth was never seen in Harlem again. Legend has it he moved to Jersey, got a job at a gas station, and covered his scar with a beard. He learned the hard way that you don't sit in the king's chair unless you're ready to wear the crown. If this story of Bumpy Johnson's cold-blooded comeback gave you chills, slice that like button. And tell me in the comments, do you think Bumpy should have finished him off, or was the scar a worse punishment? Next time, we're going deep into the secret alliance between Bumpy Johnson and Malcolm X. You've heard the rumors, but you haven't heard the truth about the day Bumpy offered his army to the movement. Subscribe, turn on notifications. The history books are closed, but the streets are talking. See you in the next one.